I'm tired of everyone telling me to shut up. I'm not stupid.
No one cares more about keeping up appearances than icy, beautiful Betty Draper. She's committed to maintaining the perfect image, no matter how superficial it may be.
Besides getting the handsome prince, are you, an actress or something?
No, I'm a housewife.
The irony is that Betty's approach to life makes her very unhappy. But she can't seem to admit that what she's doing isn't working for her. Over time, Betty's values get left behind, and she fails to change with the times.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned.
Betty Draper, that is indeed how I would describe you.
Her inability to confront her unhappiness and take control of her life is what makes her Mad Men's most tragic character.
What's wrong?
What's wrong? I hate this place. I hate our friends. I hate this town.
Before we go on, we want to talk a little bit about this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is a superb online learning community with thousands of classes about everything: Bitcoin trading, playing guitar, stop-motion animation. Click the link in the description below to get 2 months access to all classes for free. Betty's fixation on her appearance is a sign that she's devoted to values that are becoming old-fashioned. She was raised to believe that beauty was the ticket to marriage, and marriage was the ultimate goal. Betty's values come from her mother.
She wanted me to be beautiful so I could find a man. There's nothing wrong with that.
Most of the other characters rebel against their parents in some way. But Betty idolizes her late mother and holds on to her outdated way of thinking.
My mother always said, "You're painting a masterpiece. Make sure to hide the brushstrokes." She was really beautiful.
Betty's also trying to pass down this value system to her own daughter. She still believes that Sally's future rests on her appearance. So after she crashes the family car, she's more worried about Sally's face than her safety.
Sally could have survived and gone on living with this horrible scar on her face and some long, lonely, miserable life.
Other shows act like their exceptionally attractive actors are the norm within the world of the show. But Mad Men keeps reminding us that Betty is treated differently for her looks.
That is some face you've got there. Anybody ever tell you you're a dead ringer for Grace Kelly?
Her society rewards her for her beauty, not for brains or talent.
Where would Mom be without her perfect nose? She wouldn't find a man like you. She'd be nothing.
And because Betty's whole identity is based on her appearance, she can't age or physically change without jeopardizing what she sees as her most valuable asset.
Dr. Wayne tried to look down my neckline the other day. He sits behind me. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as men look at me that way, I'm earning my keep.
When she gains weight in season 5, she feels she no longer has anything to offer. The viewers' feelings about Betty are also shaped by her appearance. At least for a while, it may be hard for us to see past Betty's beauty, because we're enjoying the superficial pleasure and fascination of watching this picture-perfect housewife from a bygone era. On one level, we root for Dawn and Betty's marriage, even though it's obvious they're incompatible, because we just love how they look together.
Oh my, I am such a fan.
You know, when you imagine someone saying that to you, you always hope it's her. And this one, my God, are you two sold separately?
Meanwhile, even though we're seeing Betty's unhappiness, the viewer might struggle to sympathize with her because she's so beautiful and perfect-seeming.
It's just you're so sweet and perfect.
I'm not.
Betty doesn't live in a time when it's impossible for her to escape her situation. Other female characters on Mad Men do thrive and change dramatically. Peggy and Joan develop professional skills, experiment, and mature in their 20s and 30s. But Betty doesn't take this time to find herself. It's as if she skips that stage altogether. She's gone from being a daughter to being a wife with almost no time in between. So it's like Betty lives in a state of arrested development.
Mostly, she seems consumed with petty jealousies and overwhelmed with everyday activities. Basically, we're dealing with the emotions of a child here.
And maybe this is why she acts so immature.
Sometimes I feel like I'm living with a little girl.
She deals with feelings of resentment by trying to sabotage others, like when she's jealous of Megan's and Dawn's relationship and gets revenge by telling Sally about Anna Draper.
If you call her, you're giving her exactly what she wanted. The thrill of having poisoned us from 50 miles away.
Her friendship with Glenn Bishop tells us that emotionally, Betty still feels like a child. It's easier for her to connect with a little boy than with the adults in her life.
I can't talk to anyone. It's so horrible. I'm so sad.
Betty takes pride in saying she's a housewife.
I'm a housewife.
She likes the idea of it and the status it represents to her. But Betty's personality is not at all a right match for the day-to-day experience of being a stay-at-home mom. She finds the role itself isolating and unstimulating.
I'm here all day, alone with them, outnumbered.
Her anger usually takes the form of lashing out at her children.
You're mean! You betcha. Get in there.
Betty's parenting style involves threats,
I didn't do anything. Don't you dare lie to me. I'll cut your fingers off.
dismissing her kids' feelings,
He's really gone! Sally, go watch TV.
and just doing anything possible to get them away from her.
I don't care what they do when they're up there. They're just like a few hours of quiet.
Betty is so unhappy because even if she's not literally trapped, she feels powerless to escape the prison of her life. Her attempts to take control of her life never really work out. In season 1, she wants to return to modeling, but she can't get her career off the ground, so she takes out her anger by shooting at a neighbor's pigeons. Dawn's nickname for Betty is Birdie.
Birdie, I'll fix it.
So here it's like Betty's shooting her own hopes, or that naive part of herself that dared to dream she could ever be less unhappy. In season 2, an unexpected pregnancy stops Betty from separating from Dawn. She's talked out of getting the abortion she wants.
There are alternatives, obviously. But I find it hard to believe that as a married woman of means, you would even be considering that.
And in the end, her only small satisfaction is sleeping with a stranger before reuniting with Dawn. A big part of the problem is that Betty hasn't developed the emotional tools to face or understand her unhappiness.
I'm in a foul mood.
She can't bring herself to openly criticize or question the ideals she's built her life around.
Are you unhappy?
Of course I'm happy.
So her unhappiness has to come out in other ways, like her numb hands in season 1. Betty's psychological pain manifests physically, because she can't even admit her feelings to herself. And she tends to rewrite the narrative of her life to convince herself she's happy. When divorcee Helen Bishop moves to the neighborhood, Betty can't acknowledge that Helen is free in a way she herself isn't.
I'm supposed to be stuffing envelopes at Kennedy headquarters tonight, and my sitter just canceled, and I hate to back out because, well, you know, New York State is so important.
So instead of taking a hard look at why she feels so resentful towards her new neighbor, Betty convinces herself that Helen envies her.
Honestly, I think she's jealous of me. I've seen it before. I was in a sorority.
But there is one big moment when Betty acts on her unhappiness and says enough is enough. She discovers Dawn's real identity and is bowled over by the extent of his lying.
And now I'm not good enough for some spoiled mainline brat?
That's right!
Her decision to divorce Dawn
I made an appointment with a divorce attorney, and I suggest you do the same.
plays out alongside the assassination of JFK and the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald. Betty's more taken aback by these events than the other characters.
What is going on?
And it's because they represent an upheaval of the old rules. If the established conventions don't matter anymore, she doesn't have to play along. This seems like a radical reinvention. But of course, Betty divorces Dawn only to get remarried to Henry pretty much simultaneously. So she's going back to the same old habits, becoming a dissatisfied housewife to another man. And while Betty's second marriage is loving and honest, she's still with someone who doesn't see her as an equal.
From now on, keep your conversation on how much you hate getting toast crumbs in the butter, and leave the thinking to me.
The other characters of Mad Men adjust to the changing times and move on in their lives. But Betty can't. She's a casualty of this era. By the end of Mad Men, it's clear that the measures of female success have transformed, and Betty hasn't transformed with them. Her social circle used to frown on women working outside the home.
She's so selfish. Those long walks and that pathetic job at Benson's Jewelry.
But now it's being a housewife that seems pitiable. When Francine tells her about her part-time job, Betty struggles to justify why she's still at home.
As they get older, there's less and less to do. Being alone in the house all that time. I really needed a challenge.
Well, there's still plenty of challenges ahead, believe me.
In season 7, Betty is diagnosed with terminal cancer.
I always knew that Betty would die, would contract lung cancer. And it was something that I kind of I talk about harvesting storylines, that from the beginning, her mother died right before the show started, very young. And Betty has a sense of tragedy about her.
We might wonder why she's the one who pays for the unhealthy habit all of the characters share. But symbolically, it's because Betty's the product of another era, and she's failed to evolve. It's almost as though the future is a hostile environment for her. Even though she's gone back to school to pursue a psychology degree, it's a little too late. The irony is that Betty herself once said she'd like to die young rather than lose the beauty that defines her.
To think one of the great beauties, and there she is, so old. I'd just like to disappear at that point. It makes perfect sense.
And when an early death becomes a certainty, we see that Betty hasn't let go of her original mindset. Her biggest concern is how she'll look in the casket.
I've also enclosed a portrait from the 1968 Republican Winter Gala. The blue chiffon I wore is my very favorite. Please bring them the lipstick from my handbag and remind them how I like to wear my hair.
The upward arcs of some of the other female characters are thrilling, but Betty's disappointments may be a more realistic and representative mirror of life for many women in the Mad Men era. It was probably more common for women to feel like Betty, victims of social circumstance who didn't see a way out of their unhappiness, who were raised to believe the world was one way and then left behind when it changed on them. So while Don gets a hopeful, cathartic ending that hints at his bright future, Betty's is wholly tragic. She's resigned to her fate. And it's the same acceptance of the status quo we've seen in her all through the show. We only wish she could have put up more of a fight all along.
I've fought for plenty in my life. That's how I know when it's over.
This is motivational speaker and author Simon Sinek. He gave one of the most popular TED Talks ever, and he teaches a class on public speaking on Skillshare.
You can't manufacture passion. You can manufacture energy. You can bounce on a stage and scream and yell. That's not passion. That's just too much caffeine.
If you have a job that calls for public speaking, or you just want to know how to communicate better, this class will really come in handy. Plus, Skillshare has classes in design, photography, social media, videography, animation, and more. In fact, Skillshare has actually helped us at Screen Prism learn more about animation and design. They offer 18,000 classes about any skill you might want to learn, all for less than $10 a month. Right now, you can get 2 months access to all their classes for free, but that's only if you're one of the first 500 people who click the link in our description below. It's a great deal, so hurry up and don't miss out.